Kia ora, and welcome to Constellations and All That. I'm your host, Tracy Cartwright, and together we will be exploring the world of family constellations with facilitators and clients from around the world, looking at different perspectives and experiences in the work, having a cup of tea and just chatting with some friends around their experiences in constellations. We'd love for you to join us. I hope that you enjoy this series as much as I have loved making it. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Edwina Van Der Westhuizen. Huizen.
Yeah, same.
We just had a conversation around that, and as soon as I go to say it, it slips right away. Welcome, Edwina. It's a real
Thank
pleasure to
you.
have you here.
Lovely to.
Yeah,
Thank you for inviting me.
you're welcome. I'd love for you to share a little bit with the viewers and the listeners, a little bit about yourself and
Yeah, so I'm based in Melbourne, Australia. I was born in South Africa, but Melbourne's been my home since I was 3. So I'm an Aussie. So as far as kind of constellations is concerned, family constellations, I kind of came across that in about 2003. Kind of fell into my lap, really. I was at a networking event. Someone had a door prize, and the door prize was to come along as a representative to a constellation. And they were
wow.
talking about it, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds interesting." I didn't win the door prize, but I said, "Oh, this sounds." It didn't really make sense, but I thought it sounded interesting, so I went along anyway, and I was hooked. I was just
Wow.
hooked. I just went to every other workshop that I could after that, and did my own constellations. My husband and I did our constellations. He did we just constellated everything. And
Mm.
then in 2009, she did her first training. So I was part of that group and done many other trainings ever since, and have pretty much been seeing clients and doing constellations since that training. And I also, in 2020, I started training facilitators in this work as well. So, and still to this day, the work blows me away, fascinates me.
Mm.
It just keeps, it's such rich work. Yeah,
Isn't
such
it?
rich
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. So who did you train with? Who was your
I
first?
trained with Yildiz Seti
Yes. Yeah.
first, and then later on Ursula Franke, who's now Ursula
Mm.
Franke Bryson. Um, And I would say my style's probably more Ursula than anything. And I've kept in contact with her, even though she's retired, and she's like a little bit of my mentor, I guess, and advisor. Um, but I've also trained with Jane Peterson in the US, and different people.
Yeah, I've done a bit of work with Jane as well.
Yeah. So
Beautiful,
a
beautiful
few
soul.
different people.
Mm.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm really working intuitively. I have written down, I have got some questions that I do sort of often ask people, and one of them was, how did you get into constellations?
But yeah, I would probably say it found me. That would be the answer to that question. And I probably didn't really know why it found me. But later, as I started doing the work, all the secrets started coming out of my family.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, that's why I'm doing this work. Because, yeah, the more and more that I kind of, I guess, yeah, learnt about it, delved into it, did my own work, yeah, I started realizing how much, I guess, the work was for me,
Yeah,
if anything.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's just powerful, really powerful.
Yeah, I
Um,
say that too. I often say that the work it calls you, but my first experience, I remember saying it found me
mm,
as well. And that
mm,
feeling of
mm,
knowing this.
mm.
So good.
Absolutely.
Such good work,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you describe it to people when you're meeking someone for the
Um,
first time?
it's one of those things that, when people say, give me your elevator speech, it has to be a long elevator ride because it's kind of the thing that's hard to describe. But I guess the way that I describe it is it's different to other processes. So even if you go to the doctor or you go to any other therapist, they often just look at you. But with
Mm.
this work, it looks at your whole family system. So when you were born into your family, as much as we would love to think the world started when we were born, there was a dynamic that was going on in our family. Our parents, our grandparents, maybe older siblings, and all of that dynamic can impact us. And we now know that through so many ways that we can not only pick it up as a child through witnessing, through hearing, through feeling the dynamic that's going on in our family, but also we know that we can pick up things in the womb, and we also know that we can pick up things epigenetically. So when our grandmother was pregnant with our mother 5 months into the pregnancy, she had all of her eggs and one of them was us. So
Mm.
sometimes we know it, but we don't know that we know it. Like it's not conscious in our head, but it's in our body.
Yeah.
And even to the degree of, even when we think about that epigenetically, so I often share with clients the story of, so imagine that, like imagine grandma was pregnant with your mother and all of a sudden, I don't know, grandfather died in an accident and she's going through grief and fear and all of these different emotions. At some level, you and your mother know those feelings. And I actually
Mm.
said that to a client and she said, that actually happened to me. And the reason she came to me was because she said she was fighting with her husband. She felt like he was having an affair. When she got pregnant, she said they were so happy. But since she got pregnant, it was kind of like the relationship started falling apart. And I told her that
Mm.
story about the epigenetics. And she said, yeah, my grandfather did actually die in an accident. And I said to her, well, maybe these feelings are not yours. And the fear of your
Mm.
husband leaving you or having an affair or something's going to happen to him is actually not yours. Maybe it was grandma's fear because it actually did happen to her.
Yeah.
And it made so much sense to her and just shifted the dynamic between her and her husband. And so
Beautiful work.
it's like that switch just got switched on when
Mm.
she was pregnant, but it didn't make any sense to her. But she was acting it out and living it out as if it was her story, and it wasn't.
It's incredible how that happens, isn't it?
Hmm.
And like you said before, you're always it, it always amazes you, and I'm the same. I'm like, sometimes I can finish a workshop and I'm like, wow, man, the experiences and the human resilience and yeah,
Yeah,
and the way this work shifts things is
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. And even that, like resilience, because, even if we don't have children, none of us get to bypass being a child.
Mm.
And sometimes even the act of being born is in itself amazing, a miracle. I mean, it's between life and death. And I really believe that life was passed to us not to repeat the same patterns, but actually to heal from the past. And this is the work that really does that, because we don't need to know in our head the stories, but we know it in our body. And that's what's so fascinating with the workshops in particular, because I kind of work a little bit differently, I guess, to some people, in the sense that I keep it really, really blind. I have a conversation with the person before the workshop. And
Mhm.
so no one knows anything about what they want to look at. And even when we go to set it up, we'll just call it 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, something like that. So it's absolutely blind, because I don't want people to get their heads in the way. Because as humans, we're so attached to stories. So if we heard
Mm.
someone say, such and such was a really angry person, and then we're asked to represent them, we kind of have this, oh, I need to be angry or whatever we kind of have it
Yes.
in our head. And we know more often than not, we know that under anger is grief, or there's other emotions. And so I want to get to the other emotions without there being our story in our head. So I keep it really, really blind. And it fascinates me every single time how people don't know anything about the
Mm.
person, and yet absolutely everything shows up in that constellation.
Yes.
And like
Yes.
I had a client who, she came to me and she said, there's something going on between my 11-year-old daughter and I. We just don't seem to connect. We clash all the time. We just don't get along. My other children, fine, just this particular child. And I was like, okay. So we set it up. her and her daughter. Again, it was blind. They were 1 and 2. No one knew anything about it. And the person who was representing her daughter said, there's something over there on the floor just in front of her. And so I said, oh, okay. And so I just put a cushion there. And as soon as I put a cushion on the floor, the representative for the mother, but again, no one knew that it was the mother, stepped back. And then the other one said, no, no, and tried to push it towards her. And she kept stepping back and the other one kept pushing towards her. And then I kind of looked at the client sitting next to me, she's crying. And I said, do you know what's going on here? I said, was there another pregnancy? Like, that's what it seemed like to me. Was there another pregnancy? And she said, yeah, I didn't tell you, but I had an abortion before that child. And I said, oh, I said, is that what we're looking at here? And she goes, yeah, I think so. And she was just blown away because she hadn't told me, yet that was the thing that was getting in the way between her and her daughter. And when she finally looked at it and, you know, emotionally dealt with whatever she had to deal with around that, the relationship between her and her daughter changed.
Well, that's right, because it gives her daughter her rightful place in the family, right? Because otherwise she's holding space in the line of the hierarchy or the order of belonging in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But the thing is, she hadn't told anybody. She hadn't even told her husband because it was a previous relationship. She didn't tell her child. Like, no one knew, but her child knew. That's what's so fascinating. How did that child know? But it knew.
So for you and in your own family of origin, maybe, or in your family system that you have, what are some of the biggest things that you've noticed, if you don't mind sharing, or if there's an example of something that maybe a constellation that you've received where you've seen and there's a shift, or anything that you feel like sharing around that?
So one of the things for me was, from a young child, I was always had a fear of pregnancy. I didn't know why. I remember early on at school, all these girls were like, can't wait to get married and have babies. And I was like, not me. And it was just an absolute fear of getting pregnant. Didn't make any sense to me, but I just knew that I wasn't going to have any kids. And it wasn't until much later, and after I don't know how many constellations, that a bit of information came out in the family that my mum had an abortion just before me and nearly died. And whenever I asked her about my birth, she's like, I had a cesarean, I don't remember, change the subject, walk away, didn't really talk about it. But that was obviously related to me. But then also just in 2017, when my dad passed away, she then said when I was born, she was in a coma for 5 days. Again, that wasn't revealed.
Wow.
And I was really close to my dad, but never close to my mum. And it was like, oh, that all makes sense now. Not only the pregnancy, but also the fact that I wasn't close to her. And yeah, it was like I knew it, but I didn't know it. And the relationship with my mum only started kind of connecting after that bit of information came out, because then it made sense. So that birth trauma that I had, which I didn't know, again, I think is part of what drew me to this work.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
And then once I could get the family order right, which meant that I wasn't the 5th child, I was actually, if I counted all of the abortions and miscarriages and all of that went on in the family, I was actually the 9th child, 9th pregnancy.
Wow.
9 was almost my lucky number. I didn't know why, but yeah. I went from being the 5th to the 9th, and it was like, oh, right. That's why I was so far away from my mum, you could say.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Isn't it? And so from that experience, have you noticed any shifts in your life? Like, has it freed anything up? Anything that
absolutely.
You feel you can
So it's absolutely freed things up for me. I mean, also too, my mum got interested in the work, and she used to come along to workshops and things like that, but she also wasn't prepared to do her work. She just said outrightly, no, I I can't do it. But what happened was, I mean, as much as I would love her to look at her own stuff, it gave me a sense of peace of, you know what, maybe the best she could give was life. And I actually, thinking about it now, it was literally a life and death situation because she may not have been here. So, you know, it made me kind of go, yeah, maybe the best thing that she could give was life, and the rest of the stuff she couldn't deal with. And maybe that's why I'm on this journey. And it just created a sense of peace between her and I. You know, the anger and the frustration and all of those other feelings I was feeling weren't there anymore because I just went, yeah, you know, giving me life was actually such a big gift that
Yeah.
could have
Yeah.
cost her life.
Yeah.
And the rest, it's kind of like, yeah, is for me to do. So that I sit with that sentence quite a lot of, you know, thank you for the life. I can do the rest.
Yeah. I found peace also in that something similar, but very, very similar was knowing that actually my mum and dad didn't come in to do the healing. They came in to birth me to do that, what I
Mm-hmm.
needed to do, right?
Mm, mm.
That wasn't their role. They were here to experience other things.
Yeah.
And part of that was for me to come through too,
Yeah.
to do my stuff.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
And I mean, I come from a family of like, was born in South Africa, so middle of apartheid. We had to move to
mm,
Australia. And my dad would have been locked up with Mandela. So, you know, just even the fact of that, of having the courage to move country with 5 children and start all over again, they did so much of their own work around their culture and, you know, the oppression and all of that sort of thing.
yeah,
That was their work in
yeah.
kind of for my parents, but my work was the family work, like at a different level. So yeah, it just gave me like, it's kind of like, I love that saying of I'm doing my piece for my piece, and
Mm,
the rest
mm.
is, you know, just gratitude.
And so bringing the other 4 siblings in, obviously, you know, when we give them a place, it makes a difference in our family system. So then potentially other siblings that are living would have had to move down the line a little bit,
Mm.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So my
And
eldest brother is not actually my eldest brother because there were pregnancies beforehand, but yet
mm,
I really believe because of, you know, the traumas of my parents, and not only just my mum, but my dad didn't know who his father was. So his
mm,
mum was a single mum. Um, and so my oldest brother was holding a lot of stuff for my parents. And I think through the work that I've done, um, I really think that's helped him to find his place and not to have that weight on his shoulders of carrying everything, everyone. And I think to a certain degree, he kind of parented us. He didn't have his own children either, so it's kind of like he parented us. And I think through the work that I've done, he's been able to, you know, come to peace with that too, and not have to feel the weight of all of us, that we can all work together. And especially as my, you know, parents get older and things like that, lots put on the oldest child, and I think he's starting to feel that he doesn't have to carry all of that on his own.
and have you shared your constellation with them, or do they?
They're not really open to it, which is
Yeah.
okay. Again, I'm like, I know that I'm meant to do the work. They think I'm a little woo-woo, but that's all right. I just
Um,
do the work, and I kind of just notice. I go, oh, isn't that interesting? You're a little different. Oh, isn't
yeah.
that
Join
interesting?
the
That's a little
club.
different. But
Yeah.
I don't open. I mean, if someone asks, I'll tell them, but usually there's not much asking.
Yeah. 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 The psychedelic sheep of the family. Hey.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it changes so many lives. I mean, I had another client a couple who came to me, and their daughter had drug and alcohol issues for years. They'd tried everything under the sun. They'd pretty much got to the point where the doctors had said, look, you know, her liver's shutting down, things are happening, like, you know, this may be the end. And someone told them about constellations. They came along and they wanted to work on her, and she was something like 35. And I said, look, how about we look at you guys? There was so much in the two of them. You know, months later, they contacted me and they said, you know, the date that daughter didn't know anything about the constellation we did, but the day after she called us and said, I'm looking at a half empty bottle and I don't want to drink. And she went into rehab and didn't touch anything after that. So what she was holding was theirs. But it makes sense too, because the drugs and alcohol, was like, I don't want to feel this is too much. I just have to numb it out. But because it wasn't her story, it also didn't make any sense to her. She just felt it fully. So hence the trying to numb it out. But when they looked at their stuff, then all of a sudden, things could shift for her. She was released from having to hold it. So it's so powerful for a whole system. And I mean, abuse of so many types comes up so often in the constellations. And, sometimes really not just verbal abuse, physical abuse, sometimes there's, pedophilia, there's all sorts of things that have come up in constellations. And it's this type of modality that can look at those things because the group's helping you to look at it. You don't have to do it on your own. And sometimes I think some of those topics are so big that it is almost overwhelming on the nervous system to have to look at them on your own. So to have a group of people that can help you to look at it, and you don't have to name it. It doesn't, it's not a naming and shaming kind of thing. It's just a releasing so that people can just get on with their life. It's just so powerful, especially for little kids who, because I work at a school doing counselling 2 days a week. And, I see these young kids and they're supposedly the naughty kids acting out at school. But you've just got to say, but what's happening to them? What's going on with them? Like, let's find out about their family life, because I'm sure that's impacting their behaviour here at school. And if there is some dynamic at home that they can't express how they're feeling at home, of course they're going to play it out in the school ground. And I think we really have to look with education and everything. We have to look systemically at the wider system to get context.
Yeah. I would have been one of those kids in your class, in your office. When I look back at at all the signs, I think, why did nobody see that? But they didn't have the knowledge, right? We've got so much more knowledge and awareness and understanding now. And my sister and I were talking about this the other day. We really thought what was happening was normal. We had no idea.
Exactly. And that is so true.
We would have loyally and fiercely protected our family from...
Absolutely.
Because that was our normal, and that was, that's where we belonged.
Exactly. And that's the thing. A child doesn't know that every other family is not going through the same thing. And that deep, blind love that a child has to their system, that they will repeat. And I mean, I love the book of Stefan Hausner, even if it cost me my life. I mean, that is the depth of the love of the child. And they will just keep repeating and put up with things out of love for the system. And I'm talking when they're very, very young. Obviously, when they get older and they kind of go, I don't want this anymore, that's when the anger and all sorts of other emotions shows up, or they might say, I'm moving to the other side of the world. But more and more we see it doesn't actually matter where you go, because that dynamic will just show up in your workplace or in your friends or in some other dynamic, some other, situation. So we can't kind of get away from our family. We have to just do the work.
Yeah. I have quite a few from the Northern Hemisphere that come in, and they're like, I thought I was coming over here to get away from my family, and yet all the same things keep popping up in my relationships and my friendships and the world around me. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. The only thing we can do is look. And what's also fascinating with constellations is it doesn't have to be this long drawn out thing that goes on forever. It literally can be when we name something or when we look at something, it can shift.
Yeah.
And it's literally that fast. Like when something just gets named, and I love it in a constellation where it's kind of like, sometimes we don't even know what it is, but let's say we might just say to everyone, just look at that, whatever that is, because that's obviously impacting this system. And when everyone looks, it's like this whole system breathes. And it's just
everybody in the room's going, and they all holding their breath. Let's breathe.
Yeah. And then the whole system breathes. And then, You know, and I love that because it's like we only need that one movement and then maybe something else can shift and something else can
Mm.
shift. And I say, you know, sometimes it'll take 2 years to fully feel the impact of all of that. However, it can start really quickly with just that first breath.
Yeah,
And then there's some
beautiful.
movement.
So I remember, because you and I connected quite a few years ago now, and I remember you were doing a little bit of work with some judges in Brazil. With a judge?
Yeah, so that was it was a workshop that I was running. There was a Brazilian couple that came to the workshop, and I just happened to have five lawyers also in the room. One of them being my husband, who's an ex-lawyer, um, just coincidentally. And they were talking about in Brazil, this works, you know, constellations everywhere. It's in the medical system, it's in the legal system, it's everywhere. And they were telling us about how it's in the legal system, and in particular in family court. So they did a study. It's in Portuguese. I've been talking to them to try to get it translated into English, but nothing's kind of happened yet. But they've written a book with the research, and what they did was they had a whole lot of families who were going through family court custody, and they got them all in a room, or many of them in a room, and they did 3 constellations about, you know, for 3 of the different families, looking at the dynamic that's going on between the couple and the children. And so different people who were also going through their own custody cases were stepping in and representing. After they did those 3 constellations, 97% of those people who were going through custody sorted their stuff out with their spouse without having to go through court, because they realized the impact that they were having on their children. And actually, it was their stuff and their projection, probably, of their own childhood coming in, because more
Yeah.
often than not, we will attract a partner who is just like our parent. So, you know, if we look at heterosexual couples, a lot of time the dynamic of the husband will be, you know, let's look at your father, like what's that dynamic, or the dynamic of the wife will be, you know, well, what's going on with your mother? And they realized that it was actually their stuff, and their going at each other and not sorting it out was actually between them, and the children were getting caught in the middle. And yeah, they sorted out their own stuff. So now constellation. So I matched up through that process. I found a lawyer, a mediator, constellator in Brazil. And then we started, or she found a lot of them. We started interviewing some lawyers and judges in Brazil. She did the translation for me. Some of them could speak English. And we interviewed them, and we talked about how they're using constellations in the courtroom. And it was fascinating. It was so fascinating. Um, I tried to see if there would be any traction here in Australia, but I think we're a long way off from that. But we just used it as an exercise to just build awareness and say, hey, this is what's happening over there. See where it goes.
So is that open to the public? Where do you have that information for if someone
So
wanted
I've
to?
got so I've got a website. It's called systemiclaw.net, and it's got some of the videos from the judges that we were talking to, and it's also got a couple of videos from Gabriella, who's the Brazilian mediator and lawyer and constellator, and where yeah, we're just kind of keep adding different bits and pieces to that as and when we need it. It's kind of not really doing anything other than an information site.
Yeah, well, how important is that? That's
Yeah,
so important. Good work.
she's actually probably doing more because she teaches mediation, and she teaches constellations, and she works more directly with lawyers, and she also works with a lot of people who are you know, kind of deciding whether is it mediation, is it court, you know, what do we want to do. So she works a lot in that space. And so if anything, if people are interested, I pretty much just direct them to her. I've just really got the site just as an information place.
So is she in Australia or?
No, she was in Brazil, but she's recently moved to or something. She's moved somewhere. She's got a job somewhere, but I mean, she's easy to contact through the website. But yeah, it was just fascinating to hear that that's what they're doing there, and it was just to get it out to other people to say this is what was possible.
Because I'd heard the version that I'd heard was that if people wanted to have a divorce, they had to have 3 constellations. So maybe there was a mix in that. That's from other sources that I've heard that too. So I don't know. I know that some judges use it in their place, for people when they're applying for a divorce.
Yeah. So obviously the judge, in the role of the judge, can't, I guess, influence the decision. That's not the judge's role. But sometimes what they'll do is they'll just, I mean, one of the judges said it so beautifully. He said he'll just like get a pen or something like that. Like he might just grab something and he might say, just imagine that this is your child. And I want you to just notice how it is with you and your husband fighting, going on. What's the impact on the child with this? And he just kind of does a little piece just like that and just gets them to shift the focus on them fighting between themselves and what happens for this little child. And so he's just doing small little pieces like that. It's not a full-on constellation as much as I've heard. What they do is they were testing it with people who went to mediation, and then people who did a constellation and mediation, and how much of that ended up going to court. That was the study. Yeah. And what they found was the ones who did the constellation and the mediation pretty much sorted out their stuff 97% of the time. Whereas the ones who just did mediation usually ended up in court. So, and there was also a man, the judge who originally started it, he studied with Hellinger. And most of these judges also came across constellations first personally to look at their own stuff, and then learnt it for their own interest. And then through that, I guess with the awareness, because you kind of can't undo the knowledge once you learn it and once you understand the principles. And I guess that then came into how they saw cases and how they talked to people and things like that. And that was the study, because that they were very, very particular about making sure they weren't crossing any lines with law, obviously. But what they did was, the study was, if we just do mediation, if we do mediation and a constellation, and it was not constellation in those cases of anyone in particular. Like they did do that one study where they did the 3, but generally what they would do is they would have like a session with people, and it was like a teaching thing about constellations, and they would use generic examples. And just even in the generic examples, a lot of those people would then be able to reflect on their own situation and say, oh, okay, I'm now understanding the impact this is having on my family. And most of those cases sorted themselves out.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard that about 3 constellations before you have a divorce.
Oh, it might be Chinese whispers, as things move around. But I had heard it quite some time ago. But you also mentioned about the hospital.
So they use it in medical situations. I don't know how they use it so much medically, but I just know in Brazil it's all over the place. They use it in so many different ways. And I guess they use it as a tool to make a decision, because we can make a decision with our head, but I guess the understanding or the philosophy, and I mean, I can't speak for them, but the way I understand it is they use it as a different tool to help them make a decision. So we've got our rational brain going, this is the logical way to go. And then they do the constellation to go, well, there's this choice and there's this choice, and maybe there's a third choice. And they just kind of use the constellation from that perspective to see which one feels right in the body. But I'm not sure how they use it in a medical setting, but I know it's all through the system. But it makes sense too, because Stefan Hausner uses it a lot for health issues and
Yeah.
the emotional piece that's sitting behind the health issue, which again makes sense as well, because we understand our world through our body, and if we suppress things and don't express it, it's going to be stuck in our body somehow, and eventually I think the body will just scream at you or show illness or show a symptom to get you to look at something. So yeah, maybe they're using it somehow in that same way.
Mm, mm.
Don't know.
What
Yeah.
are the possibilities, for the rest of the
Oh,
world to start doing stuff like that?
absolutely. I think the
Yeah,
possibilities are endless. They really are. They're really
yeah,
endless. But I mean, obviously, if you're looking at illness, I mean, I never say to anyone, this is not about curing anyone. This is just looking at what's emotionally sitting behind it. But then the body's still got to heal, and that's a slower process. And you need to obviously do the things that support the body to heal. But you can absolutely
yes.
look at the emotional part of it. And
Mm,
sometimes with when you're looking at symptoms, it's kind of like it needs to get out. So like I've had people who have, come with eczema and rashes and things like that. And sometimes they say it got worse. It's like, well, yeah, it's actually getting worse to get out of the body, but then that's actually clearing. But
yeah,
yeah, I'm always really cautious to say this is not about curing or fixing or anything like that. This is just looking at what might be sitting behind it. And then obviously we've all got free will, so we can ignore it. We can go back to the patterns that we've been doing before and nothing's going to change, or we can
mm,
take it in and maybe something changes. Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
That's very cool.
Fascinating work.
It is, isn't it? So fascinating.
And you're doing stuff too in New Zealand with the conferences now. Fascinated to hear about
Yeah,
that
with
too. Sorry, I've just switched it to ask
no,
you.
that's good. I'm happy about that. It's nice when people see and recognize what's going on as well. So
Mm,
yeah, had a dream for a really long time to have a conference here in New Zealand because I would go yearly to the Australasian Intensive
mm,
in Sydney and found it so beneficial and thought, I remember when I was probably in like early, like 2011, somewhere around the 12, I'd heard someone say that it would be good if Australia had one and then New Zealand had one and Australia had one. And I thought, oh, that'd be cool. I'd like to be involved in that. And then, but nobody had any fire or any passion to do anything with it. And so it sort of sat there and it's just brewed and brewed and brewed. And I've
mm,
mentioned it to many people and they go, oh, yeah, that'd be cool, but nothing. And so it just, yeah, it evolved last year. Yeah, it was like only last year. I was at Maria Delence's. She had in a workshop here in Auckland,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, I just started to gather a team of other facilitators around. We were starting to do some things together, and I was like, I want to do this intensive. I want to make this happen in New Zealand so that we can share the work and make it
Mm,
more, the awareness within Aotearoa and help the world to know a little bit
mm,
more about Aotearoa and how we are doing things
mm,
slightly differently as well here.
mm.
And so then this April we had our first intensive,
Fantastic.
which was amazing. And we have a mini intensive in December coming up in Auckland. So just 2 days. And there's about 7 facilitators that will be
Great.
exploring those 2 days. And then we have our second Aotearoa, New Zealand Constellation Intensive or Immersion, whatever you want to call it, in Rotorua next April. So just
Fantastic.
evolving and bringing through new facilitators, so that new awareness, new energy. The
Mm,
more people that get to see the different facilitators, the
absolutely.
more the more we understand as ourselves our role in the work, and as well as it's open for everyone. It's not just
Mm.
open for facilitators, so it's open for clients and
And that's such a great way to get people to get exposed to the work because it's so hard to explain. It really is.
yeah,
But when you're there experiencing it, you get it. like you get it in your bones. And
Mm.
they do that in Europe. They do that in, that they have regular intensives, and they have facilitators come from all over the world. So I'm so glad that it's happening this side, because everyone else had to travel over to Europe before. So now it's like,
Yeah,
it's great that
yeah.
we're getting some of those people to come here. Yeah.
Come down, exactly. I've been working quite a bit on marae's here in New Zealand. So I think, well, in Australia you call them mobs. So
Mhm.
and we would call them the iwi and the hapu for the different areas. And they have pieces of land where they have dwellings on them. There's the wharenui, the wharekai, and some other buildings on there where you would gather. And in the
Mhm.
wharenui, that's where we have a tangi where their funerals are. That's where they have their meetings. Lots of decisions are made. That's where they gather as community. And I've had the pleasure of being invited to numerous ones now, but I do a lot of work up in the Hokianga, which is one of the lowest, um, or has one of the highest poverty
Mhm.
um, records in the country, but it's so welcome and it really melds in with the Maori worldview and what we call tikanga. Constellations is opening and fitting in so well
Oh, yeah.
here. It's so beautiful. And I think in New Zealand we also have the advantage that compared to Australia, my observation of Australia, um, that there's quite a bit of work to do, right, with the
Oh,
First Nations and that there. So
so much.
yeah.
So much. So before COVID, I was asked to go to Arnhem Land and potentially teach constellations
Mm,
to an Indigenous mob there, which kind of felt a bit weird because I thought they know this more than anybody. Why am I going to teach them? They already know it if someone would listen. But yes, I think you're so right that I've only come across a few Indigenous through this work, but I know that that's opening up
mm,
more and more. But yes, there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of recognition that hasn't been had
mm.
with, who the first people are of the land. And I think that's part of why we're still where we are. Because until we
Yeah.
actually get that, and again, if we go back to constellation principles, until we get the order right,
And
where,
the balance,
yeah,
right?
exactly. But, and I mean, I say this with all respect, and I say this as a coloured woman myself from a different country, but from, South Africa. But I think part of that is being able to own their own guilt around what actually happened. And until that happens, then I don't know that a lot's going to change. But I don't say that disrespectfully. And again, when we come to this work, again, when you're seeing so much abuse and so many different topics that
Mm,
come up
mm.
in constellations, it can
Yeah.
be done in a way that acknowledges what happened and helps everyone to heal. And I know when
Yeah.
I was kind of potentially going to Arnhem Land, and I talked to a lot of people about what would that look like, and they said, look, if we ever did do some work around that, first of all, it would have to be initiated by the first people.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's another one of those, we're doing it to them. If we think we're going to do, let's say, a constellation for
Yeah.
them without
Yeah.
anyone who's a First Nations person initiating it, because it's got to come from their impulse. But then
Yes.
also there has to be a balance of, let's say, the white fella who can hold what happened, because there's still a lot of trauma felt because there's been a lack of acknowledgement. And there has to be a balance of people from both sides to actually acknowledge what happened. Otherwise, we're just, what are we doing? We're bringing it to the surface again with no healing.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of work to be done, and I mean, I'd love to see where it could go down that path. But yeah, I don't even know where
So,
that
so
would
you
start.
did you go up there and work?
No, we didn't. I didn't in the end because of COVID and, everything shut down, and then I
Yeah.
think it just kind of fizzled out after that.
Yeah.
But again, it kind of felt like it also didn't feel quite right too, because again, it felt like I was, even though, I kind of get it because we've had our own oppression where I came from, it still felt like, have they, like, whose impulse is this? Do they want me to do this? Like,
Mm.
I feel like I need to get to know their culture, because a lot of what we're doing when we're putting in order is you also need to know that how order works in a particular culture. Because if we're talking about a culture where, let's say there's cultures, in Africa anyway, where, there's multiple wives,
Yeah.
and that was really clear. It was very clear. You're the first wife, and you're the children of the first wife, and you're the second wife, and you're the children of the second wife. And then, the missionaries and all of that sort of thing came in and brought in Catholicism and brought in, Christianity and all of that sort of thing. And then they said, no, that's not allowed. And then what happened was the tradition of the people was then shamed, and then we
Mm.
wonder why we've got affairs and all of this sort of thing, and everything's out of order. Because before that, which is kind of where I think it made sense when Hellinger went there to the Zulu, because he saw when it's really clear, like in those indigenous cultures,
Yeah.
it's really clear what the order is. The rite of passage is really clear. It's everything's really, really clear. It's when that's been messed with that then everything's out of order.
When someone comes
And
in feeling like they're bigger and they know better and
exactly.
they can do it more, right?
And they come in without asking, without observing, without finding out what they're doing, but coming in with this sense of, I know better, and what you're doing is wrong, and, turning it around
Mm.
and making them do something that is not inherently theirs. And then we wonder why we're in the situation where we are now. And I mean, that even goes to war. I'm going to get on my soapbox here, so stop me. But it even gets to war. We had 17, 18-year-old kids who went to war,
Yeah.
who were taught to do what is not a normal human act, to kill another human, often not even knowing why they were doing it. And then they came back. We didn't understand PTSD. They came back and got medals for what they did.
Mm.
And they were told to get back into society and basically suppress all that happened and their feelings. And there was nothing that helped them to enter back into society. And we wonder why we've got so much anger and violence in the world.
I see a lot of suicide connected to that,
Yes,
and our
absolutely.
and the ones that have come through to see me. Often there's a link with the suicidal tendencies, particularly with the young men, to their
Yeah,
grandfathers or great
yeah,
grandfathers that are
yeah,
all that suppression. And
yeah.
yeah,
And
I
then
mean,
we're
obviously
telling the
there's other
boys,
reasons.
oh yeah, and we're
Mm.
telling them, don't cry, don't be a girl, don't cry, and all that. So we're telling them basically it's not okay for you to be with your feelings. Yet
Mm.
what they had to deal with, the circumstances they were in, again, we didn't understand trauma, we didn't understand PTSD, we didn't understand any of that sort of thing, and we didn't do anything to help them. We
And there are
just tried to send them
still
back.
people that are experiencing war now, right?
Absolutely.
You know, that we privilege are not having to experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. But not only that, then we also sent not just boys, but girls as well into, organizations that were supposed to be safe organizations. And we know how that turned out as well. And we're thinking, so all of these places that have created so much trauma, we haven't remotely dealt with that. But it can be done, I really believe, with this kind of work in a way that's really honoring and respecting, and it's not shaming, but it's actually helping to get healing and closure and helping people to move on. Um, for our young kids now, that's absolutely what we need.
Yeah, acknowledging what was, right?
Yeah,
Rather than putting the blinkers on or just putting your head down in the sand, it's
yeah,
acknowledging what was so that you can move forward.
yeah, yeah. Because
Mm.
that's why I think, the kids, we've got so many different presentations that are showing up in the children these days that wasn't there before. And I
Mm,
really think it's because it's wants to be seen, wants to be looked at, wants to be
yeah.
acknowledged so we can all move on.
Mm,
And this is such a beautiful and respectful way to do that. And the collective nature of the group work is so beautiful, where other people willingly come along and feel, stand in and feel for somebody that they've never met and may never meet again, and to feel some big feelings and
yeah.
helping them to heal and get insight into their situation that they probably wouldn't have got by themselves, or it would have been too much for their own nervous system to hold on its own. It's
Yeah.
so, like, it just, every time I finish a workshop, it's just such, so humbling to see that these people come along, willingly give up their day to feel into and help people that they've never met before, never
Mm,
may meet again. But yet they build such a strong connection to these people in a
yeah.
short amount of time, and it helps everybody. And even just witnessing, even without doing your constellation, helps so many people. Because I often say you may only do a few constellations in your whole life, but coming and representing over and over and over again, I think it just gives us a level of compassion for others that we can't get in any other way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Whereabouts in Melbourne do you run your constellations? I know you do some online.
Yeah, I do some online. This year, the online's been a bit slow. People, I think, have got a bit sick of online and they've preferred to go back to live, but I do continue to run the online. And I work between Seaford and Caulfield. So I'm kind of like not in the city, but I'm kind of, you know, close-ish to the city and then a bit further out. So I kind of move around. But then I've also this year been to Perth. I go to Sydney,
Mm,
going to Ballarat. So I kind of travel around a little bit to spread the word. And also because I'm teaching it as well, I've got students in different places. So I often like to go to some of those places, run a few workshops, and then kind of pass the baton onto them and say,
yes.
okay,
Yep.
you come along to the workshops. I'll run them so that you can, just to get interest. And then I just pass the baton and then I say, such and such is going to do them from now on, and do
Yeah.
that. Because, this,
Create
I
the
can't do it
groundwork.
all. Yeah, I can't
Yeah.
do it all. We
Yeah.
need this work all over the place. So, and I just love, like, teaching, I think is one of the things that I love to do, and just be able to impart this knowledge onto other people. And the training, yeah, it's an in-depth 12-month training with loads and loads of practice. So people come out the other end completely different, because they're not only getting constellations but also facilitating.
Mm,
And it's so beautiful to see how they then take that into their own life with their other skills that they have and incorporate it into what they do. So it's just that, yeah, as I said, all these years later, it's still, no, still love it. Still so powerful.
yeah. Yeah. And even in that, right? Sometimes it's just hard to find the words. I think gratitude is something that I
Mm.
often share at the end of my workshops. Like, I feel humbled and so much gratitude that people show up for themselves,
Mm.
uh, and knowing the ripple effects of the work and
Mm.
how it flows out into the community and as well as the family, and
Yeah.
also what you see with someone who sits in the client seat or the hot seat or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. Sometimes it's like the immediate shifts in their faces or their body. Or
Absolutely.
I had a gentleman come to one of the wānangas up in the Hokianga, and he was quite grey looking, like his skin was really grey, and he had this sort of like complete frightened look on his face, which just kind of, well, I'd never met him before, so I didn't know
Mm.
it wasn't what he looked like
Mm.
until after the constellation. And then it was like, all of a sudden his face started to change
Yeah.
color. There was more
Yeah.
blood flowing through his body, and his all of his features relaxed, and he looked
Absolutely.
10 years younger within half an
Absolutely.
hour of having his constellation
Yep.
experience.
Yep.
Mm,
Absolutely. And also too, for some people, like I had a workshop on Sunday, and for some people, just also to see the magnitude of their situation. Like they might have 5 different family members represented, and they can relate to every single feeling that all of those are feeling. And then they go, oh, no wonder I'm overwhelmed. This is actually 5 different people's feelings and I'm feeling it all. And it just makes them have, like, it just makes so much sense to them. No wonder this was so big. No wonder I couldn't deal with it on my own, because half of it wasn't even mine, and it was so overwhelming because look at all of these people. And just getting that clarity of, you know, where this belonged or where it started, or
isn't
the
it a
pattern
relief
that repeats.
when you give something back that doesn't belong to you? Sometimes clients struggle to, so say they're carrying something for their mum, and I've given them an object to represent that. You know, can I invite them to leave it with their mum? And they're like, they might be a bit resistant there. Oh no, she can't handle it. Well, we're going to put that one into, okay, you're the little one here. But also I remind them that, I say to them, imagine mum's a jigsaw puzzle and that you're carrying some of her pieces here. You're holding them because you love her. You know, there's a deep love there, and you're carrying them. But they're actually too much for you because you're a jigsaw puzzle and you have your own pieces, and they will never fit into your puzzle properly. And that is usually like there's a little bit of a breath out and a light bulb moment. Oh yeah, okay, And I'll take it another generation and say, and your children, like, they have their own pieces, and you wouldn't want them carrying your pieces of your puzzle, right? And they're like, no. So it's like, it allows them to just take that
Absolutely
step to give it back. Yeah.
I actually find too that sometimes when they see their parents standing on their own, it's hard to give back. But if they've got enough, like if their parents and their grandparents and whatever, and there's more behind them, and I say, you know what, they're not just taking it, because it's probably not even theirs. And it probably, you know, if everyone took their own little piece, this, you know, there would be nothing here. And so when they see, you know, many more behind them, it's much easier for them to go, yeah, this was not mine, and it probably wasn't even my parents, and that story belongs way back. It's much easier for them to, not have to do it.
To let it go. Yeah.
But it's all out of love. And it's fascinating what people will do out of love. Like take on things to their own detriment. And again, like Stefan Hausner's book, even if it cost me my life. And I've even had that where there's been suicide and things like that. And it's like they couldn't, or they didn't have this tool, they didn't know a way to deal with it. But I really believe that once someone's willing to look systemically, it's like all the ancestors come and help and say, yeah, let me help you, let me guide you, let me give you information that's going to help to shift this, because they don't want to see it continue on into the next generation.
Yeah.
So powerful.
Recognizing that we have the tools now.
Yeah.
Well, and I also acknowledge that this work is ancient, you know, like it came through in the 80s, but it goes well beyond that. For me, I recognize that it's our people of the fire, right?
Yes.
We all come from the ancient ones of the fires, and I believe it's from there, and probably even beyond that.
Exactly. And that's why I said, when I was asked to go to Arnhem Land, I was like, they should be teaching me. This is their work. It's not my work. It's they know this more than anyone, but it's been kind of, I don't know, traumatized out of them kind of thing because of the, colonization. It's, I've got Indigenous ancestors in my family from Africa. It's like, it's their work. So it's like, it's within all of us if we go back far enough. This is the work. And unfortunately, we've kind of forgotten it, lost it. And hopefully this is a way of remembering.
It's the disconnection, isn't it? Yeah.
And hopefully this is the way that we can reconnect to that. Because what I often notice, and what a lot of people say as well as myself, is that this work helps us to realize how connected we actually are, because it's the stories in the head and that disconnects us, but at a heart level, we're all the same. We've all felt sadness, anger, fear, grief, whatever it is. That's what brings us together. But it's the stories.
It goes
of the
beyond
mind.
culture and
Absolutely.
and you know, culture, race,
Yeah.
sexuality. It goes beyond all of that.
Absolutely.
It reminds us of our humanness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
And-
sometimes gets in the way, our humanness, but
yeah, but if we
it
go to
also
our
brings us together.
feelings, exactly. If we just look at the feelings, and that all feelings are necessary. All feelings are necessary, and it's actually the suppression of those feelings, like the suppression of the people's in the war, their grief and their sadness and their anger and their, you know, all of those emotions. It's that suppression. It's the suppression that, you know, these cultures where multiple marriages was how they culturally what they did, and that was then suppressed. It's the you know, people couldn't be with someone because they loved them, but because they were of the wrong class or the wrong religion or the wrong race or whatever. It's all of that that got suppressed, that what is what we're dealing with now. And when we realize, you know what, we're all connected and we all belong and we all have a place, then we can all heal.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. It's been so lovely to talk.
Thank you.
And to share, and there's such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom as well. So yeah, a great pleasure to have you here with me today, Edwina.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we'll put in your contact details into the link, and if anyone's interested in, you know, checking out the systemic law as well as checking out your website and the trainings that you have.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Look forward
and
to...
all the best for the next intensive you have in April and the mini one.
Thank you. Yeah, long, you know, and many more to come, obviously. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
well done.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening. Head over to Instagram and tell me what's resonated for you with this episode. You'll find me at tracy.cartwright. That's Tracy with no E. .cartwright. Or head over to my website, tracycartwright.co.nz, and receive a free audio with the gift from your ancestors. So until next time, be kind to yourself and have fun doing it.